Some photos don't just haunt, they warn. A woman accused of witchcraft dies and curses her killers. A daughter imprisoned by her own mother stares into sunlight after 25 years in chains. A rugby team smiles moments before being buried alive in ice. Stay to the end, because these aren't just images. They're the last moments before the unimaginable became real. In 1909, the Romanian city of Timișoara whispered the name Loana Constantinescu like it was an omen. She was 27 years old, tall and ethereal in appearance, with an intensity in her eyes that made strangers cross themselves as she passed. In a city gripped by Orthodox Christianity, Loana's devotion to Zoroastrianism, an ancient Persian faith barely understood by her neighbors, was seen not just as alien, but malevolent. And it wasn't long before paranoia wrapped its fingers around her throat. What began as suspicion turned to superstition, and then to a fever of collective delusion. The rumors were seeded by two Christian ministers, Father Petru Drăghici and Brother Silviu Marcu, men who wielded their pulpits like weapons. They warned their congregations that Loana was consorting with demons and engaging in unspeakable rituals under the cover of night. Whispers turned into shouts, and the shouts gathered pitchforks. On the night of October 21st, a mob composed of men who sang hymns on Sunday and mothers who clutched crosses to their chests forced their way into Loana's modest apartment. They dragged her out onto the cobblestone streets like a hunted animal. The violence was savage. Her screams were not of fear, but of fury, and they carried through the alleys like sirens. Somehow, she survived. Her skull fractured, ribs broken, lips torn open. She was taken to a local infirmary, where the doctors stitched her together, their hands trembling. But just 2 days later, before her wounds had time to crust into scars, Loana checked herself out against the advice of every sane professional and returned home. The next morning, she was found dead. Her body was discovered on a tattered red velvet couch, her arms gently crossed over her chest like she had been prepared for burial by her own hand. But it wasn't death by trauma. Her skin was pale, almost luminous, and her limbs bore fresh incisions. Beneath her sleeves, her arms had been lacerated deliberately, and her thighs revealed similar symmetrical cuts. Next to her body stood a crude altar, constructed from cracked marble and layered with blackened herbs, animal bones, effigies of ancient gods, and a goblet. The cup, tarnished with age, was crusted inside with what appeared to be blood. Forensic analysis confirmed it. Loana had consumed multiple pints of blood. According to the autopsy, her cause of death was cardiac arrest brought on by massive internal shock. She had drained herself ritualistically. It wasn't self-life taking in the traditional sense. It was theater. It was revenge. The whispers returned to Timișoara once more. Only now they weren't about her sins. They were about her curse. Within 2 weeks, Father Drăghici died in agony from an obscure blood infection doctors could not name. Brother Silviu Marcu suffered the same fate days later, hemorrhaging from the eyes before collapsing in the middle of Sunday Mass. Then came the vigilantes, 2 men from the mob that had beaten her most ferociously. One was crushed beneath an ancient oak tree that snapped in a freak storm. The other burned and passed away in his barn under circumstances never fully explained. The fire started from within. Locals were no longer skeptical. Loana had cursed them all, and she had done it with her last breath. But that was not the end. The photograph taken by police at the scene of her death, a grainy, ghost-like image of her pale, blood-drained body beside the altar, has developed its own legend. Countless people claim that merely looking at this picture induces sleep paralysis. Victims report waking in the dark, unable to move, while a woman with bloodied arms and empty eyes kneels beside them, whispering in a language they can't understand. They wake up drenched in sweat, with the metallic taste of blood in their mouths. Loana Constantinescu died over a century ago, but some say she never left. And then there was Blanche Monnier, whose name would be forgotten by history if not for the horror her own mother crafted. In 1876 Paris, Blanche was a young woman of rare beauty and charm, adored by aristocrats and poets alike. But her heart chose a different path. She fell in love with André Renaud, a destitute lawyer whose ideals were larger than his means. Her mother, Louise Monnier, saw the union as a scandal in waiting, a disgrace to their opulent name. She forbade the relationship, demanded her daughter renounce the man and marry into nobility. But Blanche refused. She was in love, and so her mother devised a punishment not even Dante could have dreamed. She told Blanche to go into a small upstairs room to think things over, promising she could come out as soon as she agreed to forget Andre. But when Blanche said no, the door was shut and the lock sealed. For 25 years, that door never opened again. Society mourned her death. Her mother told friends that Blanche had died of a sudden illness, and the city believed it. Time passed. Andre Renault aged into obscurity, and Louise Magnier continued her charitable work, her name etched in marble on donor walls across Paris. But the secret festered upstairs like rotting flesh. In 1901, a single anonymous letter changed everything. It reached the Paris police and accused the Magnier family of a horrific crime hidden in their estate. The police arrived, skeptical but bound by duty. Louise welcomed them in with tea and smiles. They walked through grand halls and velvet-draped parlors. Everything was immaculate, but as they prepared to leave, one officer paused near a staircase. At the top was a narrow door, padlocked shut. When asked, Louise claimed it was merely a storeroom. Her tone shifted when the officers insisted on opening it. She refused. Her voice cracked. The lie broke in her throat like glass. They forced the lock open. What they found behind that door haunted them for the rest of their lives. The stench hit them first, a revolting amalgam of urine, feces, rot, and death. Inside was Blanche, a skeleton in human skin, curled into herself on a straw mattress black with decay. Her eyes, enormous and sunken, flinched at the light as one officer tore away the wooden planks from the windows. It was the first sunlight she had seen since 1876. She was unclothed, save for rags that barely clung to her bones. Her hair had matted into a tangled nest crawling with lice. Her limbs were bent at grotesque angles from years of immobility. She weighed 55 pounds. Chains bolted to the bed held her like an animal. The officers vomited in the hallway. Louise Magnier, standing below, was calm. She simply said, she was stubborn. Blanche was removed, placed into a hospital, and then later into a psychiatric asylum where she would live the remainder of her life. Despite the unimaginable torment, she was lucid. Her first words were, "How beautiful the sun is." Louise Magnier never faced justice. Public outrage was so intense that a mob descended upon the Magnier mansion, hurling rocks and curses. The stress of it all gave Louise a fatal heart attack, and she died days later. Her son Marcel, who had known the truth and done nothing, escaped any real punishment under claims of familial obedience. Blanche Magnier lived 10 more years in state care. Though her body remained a broken frame, her mind fluttered between past and present like a torn page caught in a breeze. She never returned home, and the only photograph ever taken of her immediately after her rescue, sunlight on her face, eyes wide in madness, ribs jutting out beneath translucent skin, became infamous. It sits in police archives, but when it leaks online, it is often quickly removed. Viewers claim that Blanche's eyes follow them. Some say they've heard whispers when scrolling past the image. No one forgets it. No one sleeps well after seeing it. But the final tale in this grim trinity of photographs is not one of curses or confinement. It is a story of choice. On October 13, 1972, Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 vanished over the Andes Mountains with 45 souls aboard. The passengers included the Old Christians club rugby team and their friends and family. The pilots, misreading their location, began descending prematurely. Instead of a runway, the aircraft met a jagged wall of rock. The collision tore the plane apart. 7 passengers were sucked out instantly. The fuselage tumbled down the mountain at over 350 kilometers per hour. 2 more died on impact. But against all odds, 33 people survived the crash. And that was only the beginning of their nightmare. Night temperatures dropped to minus 30 degrees Celsius. The survivors fashioned makeshift shelters from suitcases and debris. They wrote SOS in lipstick across the snow-covered fuselage, but no one came. Food ran out in a matter of days. They chewed leather from the seats, stripped cotton from jackets, anything to ease the hunger. Then came the radio. A single crackling voice announced that the search had been called off. The world thought they were dead. At that moment, they truly were. The decision was inevitable. They wept as they sliced. Some prayed, some vomited, some refused and slowly starved. 2 months passed. An avalanche buried them again, eliminating 8 more and briefly extinguishing all hope. Yet in their despair, they kept living, kept chewing, kept breathing. And when there was nothing left to eat, the dead of the avalanche became salvation. Finally, 2 survivors, Fernando Pardo and Roberto Canessa, decided they would rather die trying to escape than wait to be buried. With no map, no compass, and no knowledge of mountaineering, they walked into the white abyss. For 9 days, they trudged over razor-sharp ice, through winds that split their lips and froze their tears. On the 10th day, they stumbled into a Chilean valley and saw fishermen. A note scrawled on paper wrapped around a stone told the story. Helicopters arrived within hours. 14 survivors remained. All were rescued. All were haunted. The infamous photograph taken just minutes before the crash, smiling faces, some laughing, some asleep, captures an innocence that was obliterated. The contrast between that joy and the horror that followed is too much for most to bear. Families of the dead never look at it. Survivors speak of it in whispers, because those faces never aged. They never knew what was coming. They say one image can carry 1,000 words, but these 3 images carry screams. The last gaze of Loana Constantinescu, hollow and triumphant. The haunted face of Blanche Monnier, breaking beneath sunlight. The smiling team aboard Flight 571, inches from the edge of the world. They are portraits not of death, but of what death can twist us into. And they are proof that sometimes it is not the image itself that is disturbing. It is the story it refuses to let us forget. Which of these stories disturbed you the most, and why? Do you believe that certain images carry energy that can be felt across time? How would you have reacted in Loana's final moments, or Blanche's imprisonment, or on that doomed flight into the Andes? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe if you want more stories that history tried to silence.